You're standing at your kitchen sink right now, rinsing rice for dinner. That cloudy white water swirling in the pot. You tip it straight down the drain without a second thought. You've done it 1,000 times, maybe 10,000, and every single time you've poured away one of the most effective soil amendments that exists on this planet. For free. What if I told you that milky water you just washed down the pipes is loaded with starches, phosphorus, and beneficial microbes that your garden soil is literally starving for right now? What if the thing standing between you and the healthiest soil you've ever grown in was something you already make in your kitchen several times a week and throw away every time? I'm going to show you 3 specific ways to use that leftover rice water in your garden, starting with the simplest method you can try tonight and building up to a fermentation technique that Korean natural farming practitioners have relied on for decades. That third method is the one most gardeners in the West have never encountered, and it produces results that genuinely surprised me the first time I used it. Stay with me. This channel is where we turn everyday kitchen waste and overlooked habits into real, practical growing knowledge for experienced gardeners who want better soil without spending money. New videos come out every week. If that sounds like something you need, subscribe now and let's get back to your rice water. Let's start with the most straightforward approach. The direct pour. You rinse your rice, you collect that cloudy water in a bowl or a pitcher instead of letting it run down the drain, and you pour it directly onto your garden soil. That's it. No waiting, no fermenting, no special process. The water from rinsing uncooked rice contains starch, small amounts of phosphorus, potassium, and nitrogen, along with B vitamins and trace minerals that leached off the grain's surface. When you pour this onto soil, you're feeding the microbial community that already lives in your dirt. Soil bacteria consume those starches as a carbon energy source, and when bacteria thrive, they make nutrients available to your plant roots in forms the plants can actually absorb. Here's how to do it well. Use the water from the first and second rinse only. That's where the concentration is highest. The water should look distinctly milky, not just slightly hazy. Pour it at the base of your plants, directly onto the soil, not on the leaves. Aim for about 1 to 2 cups per plant for containers, or a generous pour along the root zone for in-ground plants. You can do this every time you cook rice, which for many of us means several times a week. Now the mistake. The most common error with direct pour is using water that's too hot. If you're collecting the water your rice was boiled or simmered in, you need to let it cool completely to room temperature before applying it. Hot water will damage surface roots and kill the very soil microbes you're trying to feed. The water from rinsing raw rice doesn't have this problem, which is one reason I prefer it for the direct method. Now here's where things get more interesting. The second method is fermented rice water, and this is where you move from simply feeding your soil to actively culturing beneficial microorganisms. You take that same rinse water from raw rice, pour it into a glass jar, fill it about halfway, cover the top loosely with a cloth or paper towel secured with a rubber band, and leave it on your kitchen counter at room temperature for 2 to 3 days. You'll know fermentation has begun when it starts to smell slightly sour, like a mild yogurt. It shouldn't smell rotten or putrid. If it does, something went wrong and you should discard it and start over. What's happening during those 2 to 3 days is that naturally occurring lactic acid bacteria, the same family of organisms that make sauerkraut and kimchi, are multiplying rapidly in that starchy water. They're feeding on the sugars and starches and producing lactic acid as a byproduct. When you apply this fermented rice water to your soil, you're not just providing nutrients anymore. You're introducing a living culture of beneficial bacteria that suppresses harmful pathogens, improves soil structure, and accelerates the breakdown of organic matter. Dilute it before use. Roughly 1 part fermented rice water to 5 parts fresh water. Apply it to soil the same way, at the base of plants, once a week. The mistake people make with fermentation is letting it go too long. 3 days is usually the sweet spot in a warm kitchen. If you leave it 5, 6, 7 days, the bacterial population shifts, the pH drops too far, and you end up with something too acidic to apply directly without shocking your soil biology. 2 to 3 days, that's your window. The third method is the most powerful, and it builds directly on what we just discussed. This is how you make what Korean natural farming calls labs, lactic acid bacteria serum. You start the same way. Ferment your rice water for 3 days, but then you take that fermented liquid and add milk to it. Whole milk works best. Pour it in at a ratio of roughly 1 part fermented rice water to 10 parts milk. Cover it loosely and let it sit for another 5 to 7 days. What happens next is remarkable. The lactic acid bacteria from your rice water will consume the sugars in the milk, and you'll see the liquid separate into 2 distinct layers. A thick yellowish curd will form on top, and a clear to pale yellow liquid will settle beneath it. That clear liquid underneath is your lab serum. Carefully remove the curd on top. You can compost it or discard it, and strain the clear serum into a clean bottle. This serum is a concentrated living culture. To preserve it, add an equal volume of unsulfured molasses, which feeds the bacteria and keeps them alive in storage. Stored this way in a cool, dark place, it can last for months. When you're ready to use it, dilute 2 tablespoons of the serum into a gallon of water and apply to your soil, your compost pile, or even as a foliar spray in the early morning. The mistake with labs is contamination. Every container you use must be clean. Not hospital sterile, but washed thoroughly with hot water. If you introduce mold spores or competing bacteria from a dirty jar, your batch will fail. You'll know, because instead of a clean separation between curd and clear serum, you'll get a murky, foul-smelling mess. Clean jars, clean hands, and a loosely covered container in a spot that's warm but out of direct sunlight. Now, why does any of this work? Let me explain the science quickly, because once you understand it, you'll never look at rice water the same way again. Your soil is not just dirt, it's a living ecosystem. A single teaspoon of healthy soil contains more microorganisms than there are people on Earth. Those microbes, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, are the workforce that makes nutrients available to your plants. They break down organic matter into forms that roots can absorb. They build soil aggregates that hold air and water. They suppress disease. When you pour rice water onto soil, the starches act as a carbon food source for those bacteria. The population explodes. More bacteria means faster nutrient cycling, which means your plants get fed more efficiently from whatever organic matter is already in your soil. The fermented versions go further because you're not just feeding the existing population, you're adding reinforcements. Lactic acid bacteria are particularly good at outcompeting harmful organisms like Fusarium and Pythium, common soil pathogens that cause root rot and damping off. They lower the pH of the soil surface just enough to create conditions that most pathogens find hostile, but most vegetable and flower roots actually prefer. And here's something most guides never mention. Rice water also acts as a mild natural surfactant. Those dissolved starches help water penetrate compacted soil surfaces more evenly, which means better moisture distribution through the root zone. If you've ever noticed water beating up on dry, hard soil instead of soaking in, rice water helps solve that problem. You may have heard that rice water will attract pests, cause mold, or create a smell that draws rats and insects to your garden. Here's the truth. Undiluted rice water applied in excessive quantities and left sitting on the soil surface in hot, humid weather can develop surface mold. That's real. But at the application rates I've described, a cup or 2 per plant with the direct method, diluted 5-to-1 with the fermented method, you're not going to have that problem. The microbial activity in the soil consumes those starches rapidly. There's no food source left sitting on the surface long enough to attract anything. Thousands of Korean natural farming practitioners have used these methods in warm, humid climates for decades without pest issues. So stop worrying about attracting rats and start collecting your rice water. One honest caution. If your soil is already extremely acidic, a pH below 5, go easy with the fermented methods, especially labs. Lactic acid bacteria produce acid as a byproduct of their metabolism, and adding more acid to already acidic soil can push your pH out of the range most plants tolerate. If you're unsure about your soil pH, a simple test kit from any garden center costs very little and takes 5 minutes. For most gardens, this won't be a concern at all, but it's worth knowing. Let's talk about the practical side of actually making this a habit. If you cook rice 2 or 3 times a week, you're generating plenty of water for a small to medium garden. Collect it in a pitcher or large jar kept on the counter or in the fridge. The direct pour method uses it fresh, so there's nothing to store. For the fermented batch, 1 jar started every week gives you a continuous supply. For labs, a single batch made with a quart of fermented rice water and a half gallon of milk will produce enough concentrated serum to last you months once it's mixed with molasses. If you want more rice water than you personally generate, here's a tip. Asian restaurants rinse enormous quantities of rice daily. Many will happily give you their rinse water if you bring a clean bucket and ask politely. You'd be surprised how much free supply is available if you simply ask. As for storage, keep your fermented rice water in the fridge if you're not using it within 3 days. Keep your lab's serum with molasses in a sealed bottle in a cool, dark cupboard. Label everything with the date you made it. Here's what you can expect to see. In the first 1 to 2 weeks of regular application, the changes are mostly invisible. What's happening is underground. Microbial populations are building, the soil food web is activating. You might notice that the soil surface looks slightly darker after watering with rice water, and it may feel just barely softer to the touch when you press your finger into it. By weeks 4 through 6, you'll start to see visible changes. If you push your finger into the soil, it will feel noticeably looser and more crumbly. You may see more earthworm activity. Plants in treated soil will have slightly deeper green foliage, and their growth rate will be just a fraction ahead of untreated plants. It's subtle, but it's real. By months 3 and 4, the difference becomes hard to miss. Soil structure in treated beds will be visibly better, darker, more aggregated, with a rich, earthy smell. Plants will be more vigorous, more resistant to stress, and producing more abundantly. And here's the compounding effect. Every application adds to the microbial bank account in your soil. The more diverse and active your soil biology becomes, the more efficiently it processes every other amendment you add. Compost, mulch, leaf mold, anything. Rice water doesn't just improve soil directly, it improves your soil's ability to improve itself. Now let me be fair. If you go to the garden center and buy a synthetic fertilizer, you will see faster visible results. Within days, your plants will green up and put on growth. That's true, and I won't pretend otherwise. But here's what's also true. Synthetic fertilizers feed the plant directly while doing nothing for the soil biology. In many cases, high salt synthetic fertilizers actively damage microbial populations. You get a short-term boost, but the soil itself gets weaker over time. You become dependent on buying more product every season because the soil can't perform on its own. Rice water does the opposite. It builds the soil's own capacity to nourish plants. It takes longer to show dramatic results, but those results are self-sustaining. You're building an ecosystem, not renting one. There's something deeper here that I want to share with you. When you start paying attention to rice water, this thing you've ignored for years, something shifts in how you see your kitchen, your garden, and the connection between them. You start noticing other things you throw away that have value. Coffee grounds, eggshells, banana peels, cooking water from vegetables. You begin to see the loop that nature intended, where nothing is truly waste, everything cycles back. And this noticing changes you. It makes you more patient, more observant. You start reading your soil the way you read a familiar face. You notice when something's off, when something's thriving, when it needs attention. That kind of intuition isn't something you can buy in a bag at the store. It comes from showing up consistently, paying attention to small things, and trusting that steady, quiet effort compounds into something remarkable. If your growing season hasn't started yet, this is the perfect time to begin building your soil with rice water, so it's primed when planting day arrives. During the active growing season, apply weekly alongside your normal watering. In the fall, pour fermented rice water or labs on your garden beds after clearing spent plants. You'll be feeding the soil biology through the cooler months and setting up an even better foundation for next year. And in winter, keep making labs. It stores well, and you'll have a reserve ready the moment the ground thaws. The simplest things, done consistently, produce the most profound results. That's true in the garden, and it's true everywhere else. I'd love to hear from you. What's the one kitchen scrap you already use in your garden, and what's one you've been throwing away that you'll start saving after watching this? Tell me in the comments. I read every single comment, and I learned from your experience just as much as you learn from mine. If you found value in this, subscribe. Every week, we turn overlooked, everyday resources into real gardening knowledge. Simple, practical, and free. Hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Remember, the best things you can give your garden don't come from a store. They come from paying attention.